Start with an acknowledgement of country, and on behalf of those present, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we now meet. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I also pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Australia and hope the path towards reconciliation continues to be shared and embraced. Welcome everybody. Got a great start to 2021, and I suppose you've all heard that we're going into a 7-day lockdown starting at 11:59 tonight. So for those of us in Victoria, that's not everybody, but for those of us in Victoria, we'll be in lockdown again. So the sort of Indian strand of the coronavirus has come into the state and it's breaking out into a number of different areas. So we're going to a rapid lockdown. So all the universities now are scrambling. Thank goodness it's towards the end of semester, but there's still a few classes going on. So they're scrambling to make sure that we're back online and to do that quick pivot. Today we're going to be talking about the Australian Awards for University Teaching and some key changes. We're going to go through the nomination and assessment process and the key date, roles and responsibilities of the ICOs. I'll be passing that section over to Angeline. We've also got a lovely guest speaker, Miss Anna Smith, an ICO from Flinders University, which will be sharing her experience as an ICO. And then we can talk about the big elephant in the room, and that is the lack of funding that this program will be receiving in the future from the government. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. So you've probably all met my team. You've probably all interacted with Angeline and Jin at some point. So Angeline is my manager of the awards team and has done a brilliant job over the last 4 years. And prior to that, Angeline was involved in the awards when we were managing the awards at Monash University as well. And Jin's a newcomer and she's been working as the awards team coordinator, doing a lot of the behind the scenes work, putting together the newsletters, keeping the AAUT website up to date, and a number of other sort of administrative roles as well. And of course, myself as the director of the awards, looking at the quality of the programs and the submissions and advising the committees as well. Last year, what we always do at the end of each year, we always seek feedback from our ICOs, from our assessors and from our committee members. And we ask them what's been working and what hasn't been working. And we've come up this year, there was opportunities to change, to reclassify the citations and their teaching award categories. And we've done that. We've realigned them to the fields of education that proposed by the government. And the reason why we did that was from the feedback we received was there was some ambiguity in some of the previous awards where applicant didn't know which category to apply. So we thought by aligning them with the fields of education that the government offers, that would provide better clarity on the categories, and it also keep consistency between what we're doing and what the government's proposing, given that the government was at the time funding the awards program. So that's why we moved in that direction. We also updated the Citation and Teaching Awards assessment criteria. Each year we get feedback around the assessment criteria, and you'll see every year we're continuously trying to improve that, provide better clarity in the awards assessment criteria. We also streamlined the awards category. So we looked at the program awards category and which programs had small number of entries, such as a small number of applicants, such as the evaluating practices and widening participation. We always had very few entries. So we re-looked at program awards categories and developed some new categories to try and increase number of applicants in those categories, and looking at some of the things that a lot of the universities are considering at the moment. And so we've refreshed those categories, and I'll mention what they are. In the past, we've also had a really low number of applicants for the Neville Bonner Award for Indigenous Education. We're looking at ways that we can raise the profile of that award. We've just had a meeting with PVC's Indigenous across the various universities to look at ways that we could encourage more Indigenous staff, and this is now open just to Indigenous staff only. And when we spoke to those Indigenous academics and PVCs, they were very supportive, and that was the message that we were getting across, to have that award only for Indigenous staff, even though some of the DBCs are a bit disappointed that it's only open for Indigenous staff, but it is an award for Indigenous education. First Nations people that were consulting with us were telling us they wanted it for Indigenous staff only. So we wanted to take their feedback and we wanted to act on their wishes. So that's why that's been changed as well. So the award categories, so we've got the 3 categories are the same. We still have citations, we still have awards for teaching excellence, and we still have awards for programs that enhance learning. So with the citations, the applicant would choose one of the many disciplines that are there. We've also introduced a multidisciplinary category because a lot of the times we'd have applicants saying, oh, but my discipline cuts across this area and this area. So we've introduced a multidisciplinary category. So hopefully we don't get everyone just applying for the multidisciplinary, but we'll see how that goes. And then we also ask the applicant to select whether they're applying for an early career category, the Neville Bonner Indigenous category, sessional staff, or none of the above. Then with the Teaching Excellence Award, again, these are aligned to the fields of education. So applicants choose one of those discipline categories and then they nominate one of the other categories, whether they're early career or Neville Bonner or none of the above. The awards for programs, so there's 4 categories. One's around student experience that supports diversity and inclusive practices, and we know lots of universities are focusing in that space. Collaboration, educational partnerships in learning and teaching. We see a lot of universities, especially because of COVID, now moving to collaborating with different partners, whether they're industry partners or overseas partners, to try and improve the learning experience of their students. Curriculum transformation and innovative pedagogy. Over the last year, 2020, we've seen, many changes to the curriculum because of COVID, and then finally work integrated learning programs, and a lot of universities are trying to build that into their courses. They have probably been the most significant changes to the programs. Assessment criteria. So for a citation, the applicants choose one of these selection criteria, but for a teaching award, they have to address all 4. The 4 criteria are approaches to teaching and learning and or the support of learning that influence, motivate and inspire students to learn, the development of curricula, resources or services that reflect a command of a field. The third one has changed. The third one used to be around effective evaluation practices. And a lot of applicants were confusing that with assessment practices. So this is really around, we've changed it now to be effective assessment practices that bring about improvements in student learning and with a focus on academic integrity, because that's been a huge issue last year with the move to online. And then finally, the last category hasn't changed. It's still around innovation or leadership that has influenced and enhanced learning and teaching or the student experience. So they're the categories. So there's a couple of changes that we've made. I'm going to now pass on to Angeline to outline the process.
So as you know that this year, the nomination process for the Neville Bonner Award is slightly different. We have invited your PVCI and DVCA to recommend nominees, and the closing date is Monday, 31st of May. And upon receiving the list, we, the awards team, will invite the potential applicants to the briefing sessions and connect them with a mentor, either from AAUT network or from your institutions. If the nominees decided to proceed, they will submit their applications through their ICOs. So from there onwards, all nominations will go through the regular channel. The key dates are on Friday, 13th of August, you as the ICO will receive the account ID to access the awards portals, as well as the instructions on how to use the awards portal. By Friday, 27th of August, you as an ICO to register the nominees' details online. And by Friday, 17th of September, you to submit all applications and photos online. So that is the whole nomination process and the key date. So what happened after the nomination process is actually the assessment process. And there are 3 stages to the assessment process. In October, we will have the assessors to evaluate the applications. So firstly, the assessors is to individually review up to 4 applications. And each application is reviewed by a team of 3 assessors. And they will come together during collaborative assessment to reach an agreement of the final ratings and feedback on the systems. Sometimes the assessors will have 1 session, sometimes they will have more than 1. And in the event that they can't reach an agreement, it will be put forward to the awards committees to review the applications. After the assessors have reviewed, the results will then be put forward to the respective award committees, who will confirm the assessors' ratings and finalize the recipient list for UA Board of Directors for endorsement and sign-off. So as you can see, we have a very tough and rigorous process to assess the applications. So as an ICO, you are the central point of contact for all AAUT related matters for both your institutions and for the awards team. And as an ICO, you are the only person in your institutions given access to the awards portal with an allocated account ID and password. And you will be responsible to upload all of your institution's nominations via the awards portal. And as an ICO, you are required to disseminate all AAUT-related news to your institutions and nominees, as well as promoting the awards in your institution. Let's welcome Anna Smith from Flinders University to share her experience as an ICO. Anna has been an ICO since 2007, and she's been through many changes in the award, and she is also an active member of the South Australia Northern Territory Promoting Excellence Network. Over to you, Anna.
Thanks so much, Angeline. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me to speak. I feel a little bit like it's sort of too little too late, and we were saying before we started that, yeah, we should have done this 3 years ago, but I'm really, really pleased and happy, proud to be here today as the ICO for Flinders. I would like to start by acknowledging that here on the Bedford Park campus of Flinders, I come to you from Ghana land, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I pay my respects to the First Nations people of all the lands on which our institutions operate. I was asked to talk a little bit about my role as an ICO. In doing so, I'm going to cover off a little bit about some of the changes that I've seen, because I sort of feel like in a way I've been here at the very beginning and now sort of at the end, so with a few gaps in between, but I have kind of seen quite a bit over the years. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about what being an ICO at Flinders means for me, what it involves, and particularly some of the challenges I have faced over the years. So I pondered that a little bit and kind of honed in on 2 challenges, really. There's probably more than that you may experience, but 2 stood out for me. And so I'm going to talk a bit about what approaches I take to maybe overcome some of those challenges. My name is Anna Smith, and I am a project officer. I'm the project officer for learning and teaching in the Centre for Innovation in Learning and Teaching at Flinders University. So as a project officer, if any of you are project officers, you'll know that it's a very diverse role. I wear many, many hats. So my work encompasses curriculum design and improvement, benchmarking, coordinating events and networking, support for advanced HE fellowships, information sharing, and of course teaching award administration and support. And it's in that space that I am the ICO. So it's a facet of my job. So I first started at Flinders in 2007, as Angeline mentioned, as a 0.4 project officer. So I worked 2 days a week. That was solely my job, was teaching awards administration back then. And I was the ICO, the very first sort of ICO, I suppose. I worked very closely with our then DVCA, and I developed networks and support for staff applying for teaching awards and grants. So back then, Flinders' approach was we wanted to build up a cohort of teaching quality. So we were kind of starting from the grassroots, so to speak, and building it up. And I've seen that happen over time. So I've been an ICO pretty much ever since then, give or take a few years when I had some children and things like that. So starting in 2007, my first experience as ICO was when I'm going to take you a bit down sort of memory lane here. Some of you may know this and some of you may not. My first experience as ICO was when newly established Australian Learning and Teaching Council, ALTC, had just taken over coordination of teaching awards and grants from the Carrick Institute. So this really is the dark ages. The years with the ALTC were what I fondly refer to as the halcyon days of teaching awards and grants, because they were, back then, this was a Labor government, they were highly lucrative, well supported, and teaching grants were actually category 1 grants, which meant that they could be reported as research income for academics. So was just a lot of support. While these were financially and sort of sectorially speaking wonder years, in terms of the ICO role, they were actually really laborious. It was a really laborious time. So deadlines back then were sort of 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a particular day. So I can remember sitting on the floor of my office at 4 p.m, 4:30 p.m, desperately, frantically sorting copies of paper and copying CD-ROMs. I don't know if any of you were doing this job back then, but some of the applications included like CDs of their work. I mean, like CD-ROMs. So I was copying CD-ROMs and packaging everything up and couriering it, and posting it express post and all this kind of crazy stuff. And back then it seemed really rushed and very paper-based and quite stressful compared to where we are today. So following the change of government and funding priorities, so then there was a shift from the Gillard-Rudd governments. The ALTC gave way to the Office for Learning and Teaching, and the teaching grants were discontinued, which was kind of the first death knell, I suppose. That was a very sad day when the teaching grants stopped. It was during this time that online applications became a thing, and this was quite a turning point in the roles of the ICO. We had to sort of become familiar with this territory of submitting applications online, and I can remember doing that and really nerve-wrackingly sort of, uploading things and double checking that it had been uploaded, and then I'd click on it and make sure that it was the right copy, the right version. So back then it was quite stressful as well, but it was the origins of, I suppose, technology sort of becoming part of the ICO's role. And so over this time, my role as ICO also grew. So I learnt more over these years about what makes a successful application and how to support applicants generally. So while the teaching awards themselves were changing and evolving, as an ICO, I too was changing and evolving in my role. So the two kind of happened consecutively. The end of the OLT era saw, which is kind of where a lot of us, I suppose, come into it, saw yet another shift in administration, this time to Universities Australia, after some toing and froing about who would actually pick up this. It was almost like a hot potato that no one seemed to want to pick up. And Angela, I hope you don't mind, but I do refer to you as our sort of knight or our princess in shining armour, because you and Angeline and Jing really came in and you saved the day. I mean, it was almost like there was, no one was doing anything, and there was this sort of this kind of crickets silence, because I guess institutions were nervous about taking on the role and being seen to be preferencing applications or being biased in some way. And I just think, what you did by coming in and sort of saying, nope, we're going to do this, we're going to pull it together, is really fantastic. And the work that you do, having seen the evolution of the administration back in the day of the ALTC and OLT, when there were whole teams of people administering this stuff centrally, that there's now 3 of you doing this work is really quite staggering. And interestingly, I do want to make the point that I actually feel more connected to you as a team than I ever have. Even when it was more supported and more funded and all this sort of stuff, there was a disconnect between me as an ICO and the ALTC or the OLT. And now it's kind of ironic in a way that your team is so much smaller, but yet so much more connected, and I've really, really valued that, and it's a credit to you that, and the dedication and the work effort of all of you, so thank you for that. So what does being an ICO involve for me at Flinders? Well, like many of you guys, Flinders has its own institutional awards. So we have Vice Chancellors Teaching Excellence and Innovation Awards, and as Project Officer Learning and Teaching, part of my role is to administer these awards and to foster a trajectory of recognition for staff through the institutional pathway and onto the National Teaching Awards. awards. So as ICO, my role encompasses not only the technical or sort of logistical aspects of the AAUT application process, so obtaining signatures and collating the documentation and promoting the awards and registering the applicants and uploading the final applications, but I also am involved in identifying and nurturing the applicants along the entire award trajectory. So I'm sure a lot of you do that as well. So in a sense, I'm a combination of an awards administrator and an academic developer. I work very closely with the academic developers that we have here at Flinders. My role sort of straddles these two, and I suspect that for some institutions, some have ICOs that manage the purely administrative side of the awards, others that have ICOs that are very much at the strategic level of promoting the awards, and others who have strictly academic developer roles who act as the ICOs. So I sit somewhere in between these positions, which is a really fascinating, and it's quite an interest. I'm quite interested in the third space concept, if any of you have heard of that, of how I fit in that. So my approach to being ICO is very firmly connected, therefore, to the applicant's journey, from the very first exposure that they have to recognition at a very local level through to ultimately, hopefully, them mentoring others. So I've got this longevity, I suppose, or this very broad picture of the process right from the local to the national. And I think, without being too biased, I suppose, I think that's probably the ideal way to be an ICO, because you get to see the whole thing from the full gamut, rather than just the end product of somebody putting in an application and being mindful of deadlines and so forth. So some of the challenges, okay, so I'll just talk about two challenges. And so I was thinking back over the years that I've done this, and two sort of popped into my mind that may be relevant to some of you, or they may not, and you may have your own challenges, but there's two that stood out to me. And one was encouraging worthy staff who are reluctant to apply. One of the key things about my role, and probably the thing that I love the most, is identifying talent and pushing it out into the light. Academics, and I have actually found this particularly amongst women academics, they're often reluctant to sort of blow their own trumpet. They're often doing amazing things, thinking all the while that it's just their job, that it's no big deal. And I make it my business to encourage them to see things differently, to share what they're doing with the sector, and to, inspire and motivate others. And that's how I kind of sell teaching awards to them, that it's not so much about necessarily them personally, it's about sharing broadly. And I do this by meeting them in their space. So I approach academics in their space, I meet with them in their office, and I ask them about what they do. And invariably that incites in them a sort of excitement, and they're passionate. And it's always at this point that I wish that I had my phone on record and that I was recording what they were saying, because it is exactly that passion and commitment that I then have to help them translate into their narrative for their teaching awards. So that's the first thing that I find the most challenging, is getting people to sort of speak up and apply. The second challenge is about organisation and prioritisation. So it's about getting the documentation together in a timely fashion. And that's something that as administrators, we always have to grapple with. And for many busy academics, it's not their priority. They're not necessarily, they may be keen to apply, but it's not necessarily on the top of their budget, bucket list to get the forms in on time and all those sorts of things. So to overcome that, what I do is, after I've met with the academics and kind of gleaned their story, I develop sort of bespoke schedules for them. And that's really just going, okay, let's get a draft done by June. I'll give you some feedback after 2 weeks after that. It's always a kind of rough, very bespoke, very personalised schedule, but it helps them. Some like it and some don't. Some just say, I don't need that, but others do like to have those kinds of deadlines just to keep them on track. And I send them reminder emails. And I actually do have a little GIF, a little graphic of a stick that for some I send in an email, like it's like a stick to kind of give them a bit of a bashing of like, can you get this stuff to me, please? Obviously, I only do that to academics that are kind of going to respond to that. But yeah, so fundamentally, the IC role to me is about identifying, encouraging and supporting academics to share their work with the world and receive some accolade in the process. And in the current climate, there's not a lot of that around. Obviously now it's very timely that they just don't get a lot of encouragement. So hopefully, as has happened in the past, the tides will change and the importance of quality teaching in higher education will once again be a high priority, and we'll get another saviour like Ange and the team to come along and, save the day.
Thank you, Anna.
Anna, thank you for that little history lesson too. Before I continue with the presentation, one of the things that we've been doing is, back some time ago, and I can't even remember the year when it started, it's probably of this site, but we actually put together an Australian awarded university teachers network group, which you probably all know about. Anna was speaking. I was reflecting on the administration of the award. So Anna came in around 2008 when it was being administered by the Australian Learning and Teaching Council, and then after 4 years it moved into the Office for Learning and Teaching. And then actually, Anna, after 4 years there was another transition into the Department of Education and Training. They closed the Office for Learning and Teaching, and then it moved to Universities Australia. But actually the awards prior to the Australian Learning and Teaching Council were run by the Carrick Institute in 2005, so that was 3 years earlier, and then prior to that it was the Department of Education, Training and Youth Affairs, and prior to that it was the Department of Employment and Education and other government. So it's gone through a number of administration bodies, and all of that's got to do, if you notice it, it's around the 3-6 year mark, and that's all when the government decides to, go for re-election. So obviously, we can hear noises that the government's going for a re-election this year, and it wants to put its priority on key things that have been made very visible in the sector, like, how it's improving aged care facilities, the rollout of the vaccine. So it needs to invest its attentions there. And in doing so I just wanted to point this out to you. So if any of you are interested in finding out more about the history of the awards, please come to this site. So its URL is AAUTN.org, but also under the resources section, if you want to get a profile booklet of the Australian Awards of University Teaching, this is just capturing the Teacher of the Year, which used to be called the Prime Minister's Teacher of the Year, but now it's the Teacher of the Year. So this is a booklet. It goes back to when the awards first started in 1997, and we're about to do the last copy of this book to be released early next year to capture the 2021 winner as well. But there's a number of resources here, including our newsletters, other resources that we've provided, resources for nominees. There was a project which was funded, Mark Israel did, which I think was in here as well, around what do the awards mean for teachers. But it was one of the fellowship reports from Mark Israel. The other things you might want to is the mentoring scheme, and this is something that Angeline had mentioned as well. So we've got a number of recent award winners that have put their names up to be involved. And these three that you see here, Jack, Michael and Amanda, were just our recent, and Matthew Bauer, recent 2020 award winners. All right, so back to the presentation. Thank you for that, Anna. It was lovely of you to share your experience as an ICO and going back to 2008 when it all first started. So what's ahead? So you would have heard the announcement that the federal government is no longer going to be funding the award scheme. The federal government in 2018 gave us $600,000 a year to cover not just the award scheme, but also to cover the Learning and Teaching repository, which is now being maintained by Universities Australia. 400 of that 600K came to administer the awards, and that included the staff of the salary of two of my staff that are doing the majority of the work. I'm more of an oversight and providing direction, but they are doing all the nuts and bolts. But also to lease the software or use the software, that's the Spark Plus software. As Anna said, in the past there was a lot of manual paper work, shuffling around and photocopying. We've moved away from that, so it's almost paperless. So it's a more efficient process to upload submissions, and that helps us with, when we group the assessors and what submissions they get to assess. So that $400 was guaranteed from the government in 2018, but each year, at the end of each year, we had to provide a report to convince the government to continue to give us the next set of money for the following year. And the negotiations recently, we're now left with Universities Australia, of course disappointed with the decision. And we sort of expected that this would happen, and we started exploring sponsorship, so external sponsorship early on in the piece. But our fear was if we had have got sponsorship earlier, the government would not give us the guaranteed funding that they had promised for the following year. So we didn't pursue that avenue. But now, I've just met with the chair of the DVCA group, which is David Sadler, start looking at, possible ways that we could continue the awards, given that there's, we're pretty certain that the government's not going to change their position on this, but can continue the awards, but looking for external sponsorship. So David has now set up a committee, a small group, a working group that will start looking at sponsorship. Now, once you get industry sponsorship, it's a little bit different because they want to be pushing their products and they would want universities to be using their products. So you have to be using, a certain product to be eligible for award. Of course, that will mean the award categories will probably change. They're not going to be the same. All the branding may need to change as well because we'll have different levels of sponsorship if that goes through. So there's a lot of work to go that will need to be done if the awards continue under a different sponsorship sort of scheme. So that's where we're at the awards. So now what I'll do is I'll open it up for questions. Barbie's got her hand up. Yes.
Hello everybody. Hi. I just wanted to get a bit of understanding around the Neville Bonner Awards and the normal awards and how they're sort of aligning with each other. I know there's a much earlier date to submit nominations for the Neville Bonner Awards. Are they going to be, and I'm just thinking about how I'm supporting those people within my institution, and I'd like to actually just support them through our usual processes. Can you just sort of explain why that date is different and how the Neville Bonner Awards are going to sort of fit in with the rest of the awards?
Yeah, I'll say a few words and then I might pass it on to Angeline. So what we found in the past, we had a very low number of applicants for Neville Bonner Award. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to lift the profile of the Neville Bonner Award. So we organised a meeting with the PVCs and we asked the PVCs, as a way to increase the number of applicants, is to find out who are their Indigenous staff in the university, find out what they're teaching, have a conversation with them and nominate one or two. So we're hoping to get a list of Indigenous academic staff that the PVCs or others could nominate, so then we could encourage them to apply. So the idea is you normally, Barbie, you would be waiting for an academic to come to you, or you may be tapping an academic on the shoulder. What we've found is with the Neville Bonner Award, we weren't getting the numbers. So we thought, could the PVCs, who should know who their PVCs Indigenous, should know who their academic staff, Indigenous staff are, could they nominate them and then we encourage them to apply? And then we would invite them to a briefing session, which we would like to hold, to talk about the benefits of applying and sort of what the process is and give them a better understanding. If that's already happening in your institution, that shouldn't stop. We still have to go through the normal process, but that first part of the process, which Angeline highlighted in the PowerPoint, which is the green set of boxes. Can you see those green set of boxes? That was really us sort of trying to intervene to find a way that we could get more applicants in. And we thought if we could rely on our ICOs or our PVCs to put some names forward, and then we could invite them to a briefing session. Because I imagine at each institution there might be one or two Indigenous academics, but across the country there should be at least 40 of them that we could bring together in a room and get them to meet each other and encourage them to apply. So these green boxes that are here, this process up front is just to raise the awareness and to put these Indigenous staff in our visibility so we can invite them to various things to try and encourage them to apply, and then to, if they want to provide them with some mentorship. So that's all that's about. Angeline, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yes, and I was just about to say that, Barbie, at this point of time we are just wanting to get a preliminary list of potential applicants that we can work with and to encourage them to attend the briefing sessions. So as you can see on the online form, we're just asking for nominees' details and who they are and just their CV, and then we can work with them. But they still have to go through the institutional review panel in order to submit. So I have been receiving questions such as are these included in the quota? How we have the maximum 6 citations and 3 teaching. The answer is if only the nominees decided to proceed with their application. So this is just for us to gather the list of potential applicants that we can work with. And because we have the Neville Bonner briefing sessions coming up early July, and we have invited Mark Rose and Professor Susan Page to give a talk. So that gives us a chance to invite the names provided to attend this briefing session.
And so I'm just, there's a couple of questions about this further in the chat, but just in terms of, certainly in my institution, many of our Indigenous academics work very closely in teams that have non-Indigenous academics in them. So are those teams able to apply, or should they just apply for a normal citation when we've got so are you looking for individual Indigenous academics?
We are looking for individuals and teams, but because of the change this year, it will only for Indigenous teaching staff. So if you have a mix of Indigenous and non-Indigenous, we would suggest that they can apply for the discipline rather than under never born, so that they will not be missed out.
Great, thanks, Angeline.
Questions related to the Neville Bonner, and so it's a two-stage process. Let me just clarify this. So the first part was just to get some names. If we don't get all those names, but Indigenous staff still want to apply, they just follow the normal process. They all have to follow the normal process where the ICO, creates an account ID and uploads the nomination. All the stuff that comes before that is more to encourage Indigenous staff to apply. So that's all. So if they miss out on that slide that I shared before, if they miss out on the deadline for the 31st, we're not even asking them to apply. We're just asking ICOs and PVCs to nominate their Indigenous staff that they believe would be suitable for award. And then we would invite the Indigenous staff to a briefing just to raise their awareness. And then if they want to, we can assign them to a mentor. But then they've got to follow the absolute normal that's the normal process. This is just for us to try and increase our nominees.
If you have not provided the name by 31st of May and there's someone who is interested, please feel free to let us know, and we can still extend the invitations to them to attend the briefing sessions.
One quick follow-up. Sorry, Angeline, you did say that with a team award in the Neville Bonner category, the entire team needs to be Indigenous, not just the team lead. Is that correct?
No, that's correct.
That's a big challenge.
We are aware of it.
Yeah.
We raised that issue, but that's what they wanted.
And then the other challenge I see is just making sure, because there's only a certain number of people that we can put forward, we just need to make sure that the pipeline that's coming through the DVCAs and the DVCIs for people who might put forward for a Neville Bonner Award, they don't then get to, down the track, and we already have, say, 6 people that we're going to put forward for a citation, and we then can't include, we have to bump someone off the track in order to bring forward a Neville Bonner citation. So I think that's just something that we're going to manage internally. Yeah, okay. So a question with the change in the category, the criteria, the assessment criteria, it used to be evaluation and now it's assessment. Do you mean assessment as in student assessment?
In the assessment criteria, so if you're applying for a citation or a teaching award, there's one category, one criteria is around effective assessment practices that bring about improvements in student learning. So a lot of universities we've seen have moved away from those large-scale invigilated exams. So they've had to change their assessment practices. A lot of science academics who ran labs where students had to come on campus had to change their assessment practices. So what have they done? How have they changed their assessment practices, and how have they ensured that it's still that academic integrity is maintained? So that's what we're looking at. So we thought that would be more aligned to what's happening now in the sector.
Got it. Thank you.
Does the assessing and the reviewing of the Neville Bonner submissions include Indigenous assessors?
We are working to set up a team, a group of Indigenous assessors to review.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
Also, sorry, have I missed it? Where is the online form? Did I miss that portal?
That was sent it to the PVC Indigenous and DVCAs.
Okay, so yes, I have missed it. They've got it still. Okay.
Yeah, and I believe all the ICOs, because we did send out those. We CC the ICOs in it as well.
No problems.
Yep. If not, just send me an email, Rebecca. I can just forward the email to you.
Cool. No worries.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to thank you for your time and for your questions, and hopefully we have a very smooth last Australian Awards for University Teaching, which is funded by the Australian Government. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm sure we'll meet again we'll do a closing session before the end of the year or early in the next year. And I'm sure we'll keep you updated with all the developments through our newsletters. And if we need to meet again before, as I said, before the end of the year, we'll catch up then. Bye, everyone. All the best.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks all. See you. Take care of yourselves, especially Victorians.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.